One figure stood out among the well-heeled crowd in the bustling corridors of the John F. Kennedy International Airport, where the air was thick with anticipation and the constant hum of travellers. Astor Richfield, the arrogant heir to the Richfield fortune, moved through the terminal with an air of entitlement that seemed to part the sea of people around him. His clothing screamed luxury and exuded an aura of privilege. He seemed convinced that the world was a stage and everyone else merely played in his grand production. Astor was returning from South Africa, which was no vacation. Rather, it was a high-stakes business endeavour for his exports company. The business meetings were fraught with challenges, and the anticipated fortune seemed elusive. His frustration grew with each failed attempt to secure a favourable deal. The intricacies of the African market proved to be a formidable opponent, and Astor, unaccustomed to setbacks, found himself increasingly agitated. In a dimly lit boardroom surrounded by unfamiliar faces and a sense of cultural unfamiliarity, Astor's anger reached a boiling point. The negotiations were not going as planned, and the potential fortune for his company slipped further away with each passing moment.
"I can't believe this! Do you people even understand the concept of a successful business deal?"
Astor's voice echoed through the room, his frustration palpable. The African delegates exchanged uneasy glances, unaccustomed to Astor's brash demeanour. One of them, a seasoned negotiator, spoke calmly.
"Mr. Richfield, we are navigating this process with respect for our traditions and values. Business success requires understanding and collaboration."
Astor scoffed.
"Traditions and values won't pay the bills. I need results, and I need them now."
As the negotiations continued, Astor's anger escalated. The cultural nuances and the slower pace of the discussions grated against his impatience. The potential fortune slipped further away, and Astor's frustration morphed into a fiery anger that he struggled to contain. He decided to return to New York. As Astor boarded the flight back to New York, his mind was a tempest of frustration and anger. The failed business deal in Africa was not the sole source of his discontent. Rather, it was a reflection of the deeply ingrained traits he had inherited from his tumultuous upbringing. Growing up, Astor was raised by a single father, the stern and unyielding patriarch of the Richfield Empire. Astor's father was a man who ruled his business with an iron fist, and the echoes of that dominance reverberated within the walls of the Richfield estate. The mansion that bore the weight of opulence was also a breeding ground for harsh discipline and relentless expectations. Astor's father, though successful in the business world, was not a nurturing parent. The warmth of fatherly love was overshadowed by a relentless pursuit of perfection. Astor, even as a child, was subjected to the same unyielding standards that governed the business empire. The expectation for success was uncompromising, and any misstep was met with a swift and harsh response. As Astor settled into his first-class seat, memories of his father's stern gaze and the sting of physical discipline flooded his mind. The harsh lessons, the biting criticisms, and the unrelenting pressure moulded Astor into the arrogant and entitled figure he had become. In the solitude of the airplane cabin, Astor reflected on the complicated relationship he had with his father. Despite the rigid upbringing, there lingered a sense of loyalty and love. His father had built an empire from nothing, and Astor admired the tenacity that came with that achievement. However, the admiration was entangled with the scars of an emotionally distant childhood. As the plane soared through the night sky, Astor's thoughts drifted to the day his father passed away. Surprisingly, the news did not bring tears or a sense of loss. Instead, it was as if a weight had been lifted, and Astor felt an unexpected freedom. The absence of his father's demanding presence allowed Astor to embrace the cold exterior he had developed as a shield against the world. Astor's musings were interrupted by the flight attendant announcing their imminent arrival in New York. The city lights glittered below, a stark contrast to the darkness within Astor's mind. As the plane touched down, he steeled himself for the challenges that awaited him both in business and in confronting the shadows of his upbringing. Astor approached the security checkpoint, and his scorn for the ordinary procedures of travel became evident.
"What's the point of all these security measures? They should recognize who I am and skip the hassle," he said to himself in disdain. The security officers who were diligent in their duty paid no special attention to the millionaire's son, treating him like any other passenger. However, this lack of special treatment did not sit well with Astor. When he reached the metal detector, he tossed his carry-on onto the conveyor belt with an air of indifference, expecting the process to be expedited for someone of his stature. "Move it along, lady. Don't you know who I am?" he scoffed at Sarah Campbell, a lady security officer who stood firm in her duty, her eyes showing no sign of respect. Sarah, a woman who had shown resilience and integrity throughout her life, merely raised an eyebrow at the entitled young man in front of her. "Everyone goes through the same process, sir. It's for everyone's safety," she replied more calmly. It did not matter to Astor how composed Sarah's reply was. His arrogance swelled. He decided to assert his privilege, demanding special treatment in a tone that echoed through the security checkpoint. "I don't have time for this nonsense. Do you want to keep your job, or should I have you dismissed for incompetence?" he asked.
However, Sarah was not bothered by the threat. She kept doing her job professionally and stayed calm despite Astor's unnecessary outburst. People around started to exchange looks, and some even whispered about how rude the millionaire's son was. As Astor went through security, he could not resist taking one last shot at Sarah.
"I'll be having a word with your superiors. You should learn to treat people of my stature with more respect."
Sarah watched him go, her expression unchanged. Little did Astor know that his encounter with the seemingly unimportant security officer would soon become a turning point in his life. In the airport chaos, there was an agitated passenger, and this caught Sarah's attention. An elderly man was struggling with the security process and was confused by the long process that he had to go through. Sarah, who has always been kinder in her entire life, can't just watch him but be near him and say more calmly, "Sir, I understand it's frustrating, but we'll do our best to assist you. Take a deep breath. We'll get through this together." The elderly man, who had been so anxious the entire time, became calmer after hearing her words, which was more than he needed. Meanwhile, Astor, having completed his security check, found himself lingering near the scene. Something about Sarah's demeanor intrigued him, a feeling he could not quite shake. He observed as she handled the stressed passenger with compassion that seemed at odds with her role as a security guard. Astor was continuously watching this and was making confused faces, as he was quite interested in knowing what she was up to.
"Security guards aren't supposed to be comforting people. What's she playing at? That's not part of the job description. But why does it feel right?" he mused, his thoughts echoing through the bustling airport.
As Sarah spoke words of comfort to the elderly man, Astor overheard snippets of their conversation. His curiosity got the better, and he lingered, listening intently. "It's okay. Sometimes life throws challenges at us. We just need to face them with courage," Sarah reassured the elderly man, her words carrying a wisdom that transcended the immediate situation. Astor, though refusing to admit it, felt a strange twinge of guilt. As he watched Sarah act friendly to a stranger, he thought about how he had behaved some moments ago. Unbeknownst to him, this encounter would be the catalyst of a profound shift in his perspective. Unable to resist the pull of his newfound curiosity, Astor decided to delve deeper into knowing Sarah. He approached another security officer, hoping to know more information about the woman who had unexpectedly left an impression on him.
"Tell me more about Sarah Campbell. What's her story?" Astor inquired, trying to sound nonchalant despite the genuine interest that stirred within him. The security officer, Officer Jackson, raised an eyebrow at Astor's sudden curiosity. "You're interested in Sarah, huh? Well, she's quite a remarkable person. Came from humble beginnings, faced a lot of challenges." "In what way?" Astor pressed, his curiosity growing. Jackson leaned in as if sharing a secret. Jackson took a deep breath before starting Sarah's story. "Sarah grew up in a small town in California. Her parents, her mother and father, were insanely in love and lived a great life. But her father faced an issue at his business and things started to fall apart. He began to behave differently with her mother, started drinking more and even assaulted her in front of Sarah. Witnessing such trauma at a young age, Sarah grew up with a lot of scars. After a while, her mother couldn't take it anymore and divorced her father. She was a homemaker, but after the divorce, she worked hard at different jobs to provide for Sarah and ensure she got an education. They struggled more than one can imagine. Sarah grew up strong, yet kind. It's inspiring how she remained kind despite all the hardships. Her father passed away, and it was a big loss, but according to her, he was once a good father. Her mother is still in town, holding on." Astor listened intently, his initial disdain for the security procedures fading as he empathized with Sarah's challenging past. "Did Sarah face any issues at work?" he asked, still astonished by the struggles she had overcome. Jackson shook his head. "No, not at all. Sarah's one of the smartest and hardest working colleagues I've ever had. When she joined her, she was timid but eager to learn. Curious about everything. Despite facing hardships, she's always been kind to everyone. She learnt a lot of things the hard way, always looked down upon because of her intelligence. People were jealous of how smart she was, but she faced everything and has become one of the smartest employees here. She's been a great friend to me, always helping me out." As Jackson spoke, Astor couldn't help but feel a sense of guilt for his earlier behaviour towards Sarah. He realised that her kindness and resilience were not weaknesses, but strengths, forged in the crucible of adversity. Something in him shifted, and he found himself wanting to understand more about this enigmatic security officer. "Thank you, Jackson," Astor said genuinely, a newfound respect in his tone. "I appreciate you sharing Sarah's story with me." Astor's mind was preoccupied with thoughts of Sarah as he made his way to the mansion, the grandest one in all of New York. It stood as a symbol of the immense wealth amassed by the Richfield fortune, surrounded by meticulously maintained gardens and boasting a grand entrance adorned with imposing columns. His luxurious car pulled up to the front, and the automatic gates swung open, welcoming him back to a world of privilege. As Astor entered, the vast foyer unfolded before him, illuminated by the warm glow of a grand chandelier. Priceless artwork adorned the walls, and a sweeping staircase led to the upper levels. Astor's steps echoed through the cavernous space, and he headed to his private quarters. Astor changed into a fresh set of designer clothes in his lavish bedroom, surrounded by a walk-in closet filled with garments that could rival some people's annual salaries. He caught sight of his reflection in a floor-to-ceiling mirror, a portrait of wealth and entitlement. Descending to the gourmet kitchen, Astor found a team of chefs awaiting his orders. Dismissing them, he opted to prepare a simple meal himself, chopping vegetables and seasoning salmon. His thoughts, however, kept drifting back to the unexpected encounter with Sarah at the airport. The aroma of the cooking filled the air as Astor, lost in introspection, savoured the meal. The clinking of utensils against marble countertops echoed in the mansion's silence, a stark contrast to the bustling airport. Seated at a grand dining table, he found himself compelled to open his laptop in the massive study, surrounded by bookshelves and leather-bound volumes. As Astor delved into his work, his mind couldn't escape thoughts of Sarah and the stark differences in their lives. "Jackson was right," he mused to himself, his fingers typing mechanically. "There's something remarkable about her." Amid his contemplation, Astor's phone rang.
interrupting the solitude of his thoughts. He answered.
"Yes, Susan, what is it?"
Susan, one of his key employees at his company, the expansive export company that was part of the Richfield Empire, spoke with a sense of urgency.
"Astor, we have a potential deal with a major client overseas. They are eager to finalize the details. Shall I proceed with the negotiations?"
Astor considered for a moment before responding.
Yes, Susan, make sure to get the best terms for us. We need to maintain the reputation of our company."
As the call ended, Astor continued working on his laptop, his mind now split between the world of company and his reflections on Sarah. The laptop screen reflected in his eyes, but the image of Sarah comforting the elderly man lingered in his thoughts. Hours passed, and another call came in, this time from his financial advisor, discussing investment strategies for the company. As the conversation unfolded, Astor couldn't shake off the realization that he was the sole heir to this expansive business empire, a millionaire in his own right. The fancy mansion and the super-rich lifestyle of Astor felt less important when compared to Sarah's quiet strength at the airport. Astor thought about this a lot, trying to balance his responsibilities with what he learned from meeting Sarah. As time passed, Astor found himself staring out of his window at the city lights one night. He realized there was more to life than just being super-privileged. Meeting Sarah had changed something in Astor. It made him think more about life and his actions. He couldn't ignore this feeling that was growing inside of him. Little did Astor know that this encounter with Sarah would lead to more events that challenged how he saw things and took him on a journey of understanding. Months rolled by, and Astor found himself increasingly immersed in the demands of his business. The inheritance of the Richfield fortune meant a constant whirlwind of travel, meetings, and high-stake discussions for his exports company. Even amid the hectic schedule, thoughts of Sarah lingered in the recesses of Astor's mind. During one of his numerous business trips, as he navigated the bustling corridors of an airport, Astor's path unexpectedly intersected with Sarah once again. She stood in her uniform, extending a helping hand to someone in need, reminiscent of their first encounter.
"Sarah, right?"
Astor approached, remembering her name. Sarah, pleasantly surprised, smiled. "Yes, that's me. Astor, wasn't it?" Astor nodded.
"I never expected to see you again. How have you been?"
The two found a quiet spot in the airport away from the clamour to catch up. Sarah shared snippets of her work and life, and Astor, in turn, revealed the intricacies of his business endeavours. Sarah's stories were grounded and authentic, and Astor found himself drawn to their simplicity. "You seem busy with important stuff," Sarah observed, glancing at Astor's upscale business attire.
Astor chuckled. "Yeah, it comes with the territory, but meeting people like you makes me question a lot of things."
Their conversation flowed, and as they parted ways at the airport, Astor couldn't shake off the impact of this second encounter. There was an unspoken connection that had formed between them, and it left him pondering the shifts within himself. Back in the grandeur of his mansion, Astor felt an unexpected disquiet. The opulent walls that once exuded significance now seemed different. The changes initiated by his interactions with Sarah were seeping into the core of his being, prompting him to reevaluate his life. Returning to the corporate realm, Astor resolved to instigate change. He wanted his business not just to accumulate wealth, but to contribute positively to the world. Using the company's profits, he began supporting community projects and environmental causes. The man who was once solely driven by profit now contemplated the broader impact of his actions. In the course of his business travels, Astor found himself once again at the very airport where he first encountered Sarah. This time, however, it was for a new initiative supporting education in underprivileged communities. As he walked through the bustling airport with his team, he spotted Sarah at a cafe. It felt like destiny, and Astor couldn't help but believe in the adage that the third time's a charm. Approaching her, Astor expressed his gratitude.
Sarah, meeting you has changed me. You've been a big part of my journey.
Sarah, with her trademark warmth, replied, I am glad to hear that, Astor. Change usually starts with something small. Their conversation extended, and Sarah even joined in discussions with his team. It became a moment of convergence where different worlds collided and ideas were exchanged. In the ensuing months, Astor's company garnered a reputation for positive contributions, rather than mere wealth accumulation. Astor, who once felt isolated in his grand mansion, now found fulfillment in working alongside others to effect positive changes. As a week passed, since Astor's third encounter with Sarah, her presence continued to occupy his thoughts. This time he decided not to leave their connection to fate. He resolved to visit the airport and express his feelings to Sarah, spurred by a desire to spend more time with her and understand her better. Stepping out of his lavish mansion, Astor noticed the line of luxury cars awaiting him. Usually a driver would take the wheel, but today was different. He wanted control. His eyes fell on a sleek matte black car, and he decided it was the perfect choice. Driving himself, an activity he rarely undertook, felt like the right way to gather his thoughts and summon the courage to express his feelings to Sarah. Seated in the car, a familiar voice interrupted his contemplation.
Mr. Richfield, would you like me to drive you?
It was his driver, ready as always. Astor hesitated but politely declined.
No, not today. I want to do this on my own.
The driver raised an eyebrow but nodded.
Very well, sir. If you need anything, I'm here. Thanks, but I've got it covered, Astor replied appreciatively.
As Astor settled into the driver's seat, he spoke to himself.
All right, Astor, you can do this. Just be honest and speak from the heart. Sarah deserves to know how you feel.
The engine roared to life, and the powerful car glided into the open road. Astor navigated through familiar streets, the cityscape unfolding before him. Each passing moment brought him closer to the airport, and his anticipation heightened. Driving through the city, he continued to encourage himself.
You've faced big business deals, Astor. This should be a piece of cake. Just be yourself and let her know.
As he neared the airport, the bustling atmosphere heightened his nerves. The magnitude of his decision became apparent, but Astor remained determined. Pulling into the airport parking lot, he found a spot and parked the matte black car. Before getting out, he spoke to himself again.
Okay, deep breaths. You've got this.
Walking toward the airport entrance, Astor couldn't shake off the mix of excitement and nervousness. The decision to drive himself symbolizes taking control of his emotions and being genuine with Sarah. Inside the airport, amidst the hustle and bustle, Astor searched for Sarah. Spotting her in the distance, he felt a rush of emotions. Taking a deep breath, he approached her.
Sarah!
Astor called out, a mixture of determination and vulnerability in his voice. Surprised, Sarah turned. Astor, what brings you here? Astor smiled.
Actually, I need to tell you something. Can we talk?
Intrigued, Sarah nodded. Sure, let's find a quieter place. As they walked through the airport, Astor spoke to himself in his mind.
Here goes nothing. Be honest, Astor.
Finding a secluded corner, Astor began.
Sarah, I've been thinking about you a lot since our last meeting. I can't get you out of my mind, and I want to spend more time with you and get to know you better. There's something about you that's captured my attention, and I wanted you to know.
Sarah, surprised yet genuinely touched, smiled. Astor, that's unexpected, but I appreciate your honesty. Let's talk, and maybe we can figure out where this goes. As they continued their conversation, Astor felt a sense of relief. Driving himself to the airport, taking control of the situation, and expressing his feelings had been a significant step. Their talk evolved into a genuine dialogue, a meeting of two souls who had traversed different paths but found a connection in the unlikeliest of places. The airport, which had once been a backdrop of an encounter with an entitled stranger, now became the setting of a meaningful exchange. For Sarah, it was a continuation of the lessons learned from her interactions with Astor. She realized that beneath the veneer of privilege, there existed a person capable of change and vulnerability. Astor, too, discovered that genuine connections could emerge. Days later, Sarah found herself seeking solace in a cozy bar, a welcomed reprieve from the ceaseless activity of the airport. The establishment exuded an air of sophistication, with shiny dark wood, a bartender deftly pouring drinks, and an array of bottles glistening on the shelves. People occupied plush booths and engaged in private conversations, while others, perched on tall stools, interacted with the bartender or fellow patrons. The atmosphere was punctuated by the clinking of glasses and the soulful tunes of jazz and blues. Sarah, clad in a shimmering black maxi dress that subtly sparkled in the dim lights, gracefully moved through the bar. Her bag, though not ostentatious, complemented the ensemble seamlessly. The pointed heels she wore added a confident cadence to her steps, a departure from her usual work uniform. As Sarah traversed the bar, a woody and alluring fragrance enveloped her, distinct from the typical sense of airport and security uniforms. This transformation marked a departure from Sarah's everyday attire, revealing a side of her that was both glamorous and self-assured. Her eyes fell upon Jackson at the bar, dressed in faded blue jeans, a fitting t-shirt, and white Nike sneakers. "Hey, Jackson," Sarah greeted him with a smile as she took a seat next to him. Jackson reciprocated the smile.
"Sarah! Was waiting for you. What can I get you?"
"Surprise me," Sarah replied, her gaze wandering across the assortment of liquor behind the bar. The bartender, a seasoned mixologist, crafted a concoction that left Sarah pleasantly surprised. She savoured the blend of flavours, acknowledging the bartender's expertise.
"Wow, this is amazing."
"Jackson, how have you been lately? You and I have been so busy at work that we haven't even had lunch together," she remarked, genuine interest in her tone. Taking a sip of his drink, Jackson replied,
Same old, you know how it is, but enough about me, spill it. What's been going on in your life?"
Sarah hesitated momentarily, then chose to share her recent encounters with Astor. She recounted the airport meetings, Astor's unexpected confessions, and the subsequent evolution of their dynamic. Jackson listened attentively, raising an eyebrow at certain points.
"So, let me get this straight," Jackson said, leaning in slightly. "The guy who practically used entitlement at the airport, the one who threatened your job, is now pouring his art out to you?"
Sarah nodded. "I know, it sounds crazy, but people can surprise you. He's going through some sort of self-discovery, questioning his life and all." Jackson scrutinized her for a moment.
"And how do you feel about all of this?"
Sarah sighed, swirling the drink in her glass. "I don't know, Jackson. It's confusing. He's not the person I thought he was. There's more to him, and he's changing, or at least trying to. It's like he's on this journey, and I just happen to be a part of it." Jackson raised an eyebrow.
"A journey, huh? Are you sure this isn't some rich guy trying to play with your emotions?"
Sarah chuckled. "Believe me, I've had my doubts, but there's something genuine about it. It's like he's discovering a side of himself he never knew existed." Jackson looked skeptical.
"And what about you? Are you feeling something for him?"
Sarah blushed slightly. No, it's not like that. I mean, he's interesting, and I want to understand him better, but it's not romantic." Jackson eyed her, a mischievous grin forming.
Sarah, you've been acting differently lately. You're all smiles talking about self-discovery and journeys. Are you sure there's no spark there?"
Sarah laughed. "You're reading too much into it, Jackson. It's just an unexpected turn of events, that's all." As the night unfolded, the conversation veered towards other topics, steering away from Astor and the airport encounters. Sarah began feeling a bit tipsy and decided to conclude the night, bidding farewell to Jackson. Calling for an Uber, she patiently waited until a taxi arrived. Seated in the back, her thoughts naturally gravitated towards Astor and the journey they had shared, a stream of memories she couldn't help but revisit. Upon arriving at her apartment on 89th Avenue in Queens, close to the airport, Sarah disembarked from the taxi, paid the driver, and strolled toward her home. In the pursuit of her keys and her purse, she eventually found them. With a bit of effort, she unlocked the door and stepped inside. Desiring to liberate her feet from the evening's high heels, she casually discarded them, embracing the comfort of her home. She headed to freshen up, opting for a change into cozy cords with a charming cherry print. Post-freshening up, she took a moment for her skincare routine, preparing herself for a well-deserved rest. Finally settling into bed, she lay there, gazing up at the ceiling. A rush of thoughts flooded her mind, with Jackson's words echoing continuously.
The guy who practically used entitlement at the airport, the one who threatened your job, is now pouring his heart out to you. You've been acting differently lately. You're all smiles, talking about self-discovery and journeys. Are you sure there's no spark there?
The following day, Sarah woke up with a mild hangover. She headed to the bathroom to brush her teeth, using mint toothpaste to freshen up. Then she went to the kitchen to make breakfast. She grabbed eggs, bacon, bread, and oranges from the fridge. Sarah placed slices of bread in the toaster and started cooking bacon, enjoying the sizzling sounds. Next to the bacon, she cracked the eggs into a pan, added a pinch of salt, and scrambled them. Once done, she assembled the eggs on the toasted bread and set the bacon aside. Completing her breakfast, she poured herself a cup of orange juice. Enjoying her meal, Sarah relished the rare opportunity of a relaxing day off. With a few items on her checklist, she planned to tackle them after breakfast, making the most of her free day. But in the corner of her mind, Astor's thoughts were still lingering. She wanted to treat herself and decided to go on a solo date at the lavish mall, a place she hadn't visited in a while and was not aware that it was Astor's. Wanting to feel comfortable and stylish, she chose a pair of denim shorts and a cute floral top that perfectly complemented the sunny weather. As she entered the mall, the vibrant atmosphere enveloped her. Sarah strolled through the shops, enjoying the freedom to explore without the constraints of her uniform. She tried on a few outfits, treating herself to a new dress and some accessories. The experience was liberating, a stark contrast to the usual hustle and bustle of airport life. Meanwhile, Astor, in his sleek black suit accompanied by his bodyguard, surveyed his mall. He wanted to ensure everything was in order, maintaining the high standards he expected. The mall, a part of the Richfield empire, showcased luxury brands and high-end boutiques. It was during one of Sarah's elevator rides that their paths crossed once again. She was going up, excited about her solo date. At the same time, Astor was heading down, focused on his work rounds. When the elevator doors opened, Astor saw Sarah and recognized her, a spark of joy in his eyes. Surprised and happy, he decided to take the chance to talk to her. Exiting the elevator, Astor discreetly followed Sarah at a distance, curious to know more about the woman who had unwittingly become a significant part of his life. Sarah, unaware of Astor's presence, continued her exploration of the mall until she found a charming coffee shop that beckoned her. As Sarah settled into a cozy corner of the coffee shop, she sensed someone approaching. To her surprise, it was Astor, wearing a genuine smile that replaced the usual air of entitlement. He pulled out a chair and joined her table, ready to engage in conversation.
"Sarah, fancy meeting you here," Astor greeted with a friendly tone, attempting to downplay the orchestrated coincidence.
Sarah looked up, a mixture of surprise and amusement on her face. "Astor, what a small world. What brings you to the mall?" Astor, eager to keep the conversation flowing, responded,
"Just making sure everything is running smoothly, you know, the family business." "Mind if I join you for a coffee?" he asked, with a tone mixed with casual charm and genuine interest.
Sarah, surprised but not opposed to the idea, smiled back. "Sure, Astor." They found a cosy spot in the coffee shop, a place with a warm ambiance and a view of the mall. The waiter approached, and to his astonishment, Astor sat there. The waiter stammered,
Mr. Richfield, I didn't expect to see you here. Welcome. What can I get for you?"
Astor, slightly irritated by the interruption, raised his hand in a dismissive wave.
"Just a regular coffee, please."
Sarah focused on the menu and decided on a comforting hot chocolate. As the waiter left, Astor couldn't help but chuckle at the unexpected encounter.
"I guess being a millionaire doesn't guarantee you privacy," he quipped.
Sarah grinned. "Looks like even the mighty Astor Richfield can't escape the watchful eyes of the staff at the mall." Their conversation flowed effortlessly, filled with laughter and amusing anecdotes. They exchanged stories about their day, with Astor teasingly asking for fashion advice and Sarah playfully sharing her shopping escapades. The tension that once lingered between them at the airport seemed to have dissolved into an easy camaraderie. As they continued chatting, Astor felt a sense of warmth and connection that went beyond the superficial. The coffee shop banter transitioned into discussions about life, dreams, and even some light-hearted jokes. The waiter returned with their drinks, Astor's regular coffee and Sarah's steaming hot chocolate. Astor, appreciating the moment, took a sip of his coffee and leaned back.
"So, Sarah, tell me something interesting about yourself. I want to know the person behind the security uniform."
Sarah chuckled. "Well, besides thwarting potential security threats, I enjoy simple pleasures like reading a good book, trying out new recipes, and apparently treating myself to a solo date at the mall." Astor smiled, genuinely intrigued.
"A solo date, huh? I didn't know people did that. What's the occasion?"
Sarah replied with a playful smirk. "The occasion is the joy of my own company. Sometimes it's good to have some me time, away from the chaos of airports and security checks." As the conversation flowed, the waiter returned to check on them.
"Is everything to your liking, Mr. Richfield?" he asked,
a mix of nervousness and excitement in his voice. Astor, slightly irritated by the constant interruptions, nodded.
"Yes, everything is fine, thank you."
Turning his attention to Sarah, he asked,
"What about you, Sarah? Is everything to your liking?"
Sarah, amused by the waiter's nervousness, smiled. "Yes, everything is great, thank you." The waiter left, leaving Astor and Sarah to their conversation. The coffee shop ambiance provided a comfortable backdrop as they continued sharing stories, experiences, and laughter. Eventually, the conversation reached a moment of silence. Astor, feeling a mix of nervousness and anticipation, hesitated for a moment. Sarah noticed the change in his demeanour and asked, "Is everything okay, Astor? You seem a bit hesitant." Astor took a deep breath.
"Actually, there's something I've been wanting to talk to you about."
Sarah, curious, leaned in. "Go on, Astor, I'm all ears." He hesitated for a moment, then blurted out,
"I've been constantly thinking about you, Sarah, and well, I was wondering if you'd be interested in going out with me. I mean, like, on a date."
Sarah, taken aback by the unexpected confession, blinked in surprise. "A date? Astor, are you serious?" she asked, a mix of shock and curiosity in her expression. Astor nodded, his eyes earnest.
"Yes, Sarah, I've enjoyed our time together, and I genuinely want to get to know you better. Would you consider going on a date with me?"
Sarah, still processing the revelation, couldn't help but smile. The change in Astor from the entitled millionaire at the airport to this vulnerable and sincere man sitting across from her intrigued her. "I never saw this coming, Astor," Sarah admitted, "but you've surprised me once again. Sure, I'll go on a date with you." Astor's face lit up with a mixture of joy and relief.
"Really? Oh, that's fantastic, Sarah. I promise it'll be an unforgettable experience."
As they continued their conversation, planning the details of their upcoming date, the coffee shop buzzed with the energy of their newfound connection. The barriers that once stood between them seemed to have melted away, paving the way for a journey that neither of them had expected. Leaving the coffee shop, Astor mustered the courage to ask Sarah for her cell number.
"Hey, Sarah," he flashed a friendly smile. "Can I get your number?"
Sarah grinned back. "Sure, Astor, here it is." They swapped numbers, and Astor entered hers into his phone, saving it as Sarah, with a little heart emoji. Sarah, in turn, saved Astor's number as Astor. Astor, feeling a bit excited, added,
"Thanks, I'll shoot you a text with the details of our date. Looking forward to it."
A few days later, Astor sent a message.
"Hey, Sarah, it's Astor. Looking forward to our date. How about Saturday at 7 p.m?
Sarah, feeling a mix of nerves and excitement, replied, "Hi, Astor. Sounds perfect. Can't wait." As the day of their date approached, they texted back and forth, getting to know each other better. Astor shared snippets of his day, and Sarah revealed her funny talents. One day Astor teased,
"So, Sarah, any hidden talents you're keeping from me?"
Sarah chuckled, replying, "Well, you'll just have to wait and find out." On the day of the date, Astor texted Sarah,
"See you in a few hours."
Sarah read the text from Astor and felt a flutter in her stomach, finding it amusing as she considered herself too old for such butterflies. Wanting to look her best for the date, she slid through her wardrobe, but none of the outfits seemed right. As she stepped out of her apartment, she noticed a box with a tag bearing her name. Puzzled, she brought it inside and opened it to find a beautifully sculpted floral midi dress. Although excited, she felt a bit out of place, considering Astor's grand gestures compared to her simple background. Deciding not to dwell on it, she opted to wear the dress. Sarah looked at the dress in her hands, feeling a mix of excitement and uncertainty. "This dress is so elegant, but is it too much?" she mused aloud. After a moment's contemplation, she decided, "Oh well, it's a special night." As she applied a red lipstick and styled her hair into a sleek ponytail, she couldn't help but think about Astor. "Oh, I hope he likes it. He's so used to fancy things, and I'm just a simple girl," she murmured, adjusting the white mini bag that completed her look. Meanwhile, Astor was in his wardrobe, surrounded by his luxurious suits. He held up a particularly flashy one and chuckled,
"Oh, maybe too much for a casual date."
Settling on a more classic black trouser and white Gucci shirt, he thought about Sarah.
"She's got this understated beauty. I want tonight to be perfect for her," he mused, selecting accessories and stylish shoes, complemented by a shining Rolex. As they both got ready, the anticipation grew. Sarah took a deep breath, looking at herself in the mirror. "Here goes nothing," she whispered, feeling a mix of nerves and excitement. Astor, on the other hand, admired his reflection, making a last-minute adjustment to his tie. "Tonight's going to be amazing," he affirmed to himself.
Exiting his house, Astor saw his lineup of luxurious cars and chose the sleek black matte one, which held a special charm, as he used it to go to the airport to propose to Sarah. He texted her,
"We'll reach in an hour. Can't wait to see you."
Receiving the message, Sarah blushed and replied, "Drive safe." As the hour passed, both of them prepared for the night in their ways, eagerly anticipating the moments they would share. The anticipation built, setting the stage for a date that would become a significant chapter in their lives. The clock ticked away, marking the minutes leading up to the much-anticipated date. Sarah, adorned in the elegant floral midi dress, anxiously checked her phone. Astor's text had fueled her excitement, and as she glanced at herself in the mirror, a rush of nerves and anticipation coursed through her. "Here goes nothing," she whispered to her reflection, adjusting the dress and smoothing out imaginary wrinkles. With a final touch of red lipstick and a subtle spritz of perfume, Sarah took a deep breath and stepped out of her apartment. Astor, leaning casually against the sleek black matte car, checked his watch and sent a text to Sarah.
"On my way. Can't wait to see you."
The anticipation he felt mirrored Sarah's, both nervous and thrilled about the evening ahead. Receiving the message, Sarah's heart skipped a beat. She smiled, feeling a warm rush of excitement. She glanced at herself more in the hallway mirror, her reflection confirming that she was ready for whatever the night might bring. Exiting her apartment, Sarah caught sight of Astor waiting patiently by the car. In his hands he held a bouquet of white tulips elegantly wrapped. The sight brought a sparkle to Sarah's eyes, and she couldn't help but feel a surge of joy. As she approached, Astor looked up, a genuine smile lighting up his face.
"Sarah, you look stunning," he complimented, handing her the bouquet.
"Thank you, Astor. Oh, these tulips are beautiful," Sarah replied, the surprise evident in her voice.
Astor, ever the gentleman, opened the car door for her. "I thought they might compliment the beauty I'm about to take out on a date."
Sarah chuckled, settling into the car, the tulips carefully placed on her lap. Astor closed the door and walked around to the driver's side, a confident yet nervous energy about him. As they drove through the city, Sarah couldn't help but ask, "So, where are we headed?" Astor grinned mysteriously.
"It's a surprise, Sarah. Trust me, you're going to love it."
They continued their journey in comfortable conversation, laughter, and the occasional stolen glance. Sarah admired the city lights passing by, the tulips cradled in her hands as a symbol of the unexpected beauty the evening held. The car eventually approached the entrance of a grand mansion, illuminated by strategically placed lights. Sarah's eyes widened in surprise. "Is this your house?" she asked, her voice a mix of awe and curiosity.
Astor chuckled. "Well, it's one of the family properties, but don't worry, we're not staying here for the night."
He parked the car, and to Sarah's further amazement, they strolled through the mansion to a helipad. Astor, keeping the air of mystery, gestured towards a waiting helicopter. Sarah's eyes widened in disbelief. "Are we taking a helicopter?" Astor grinned.
"I remember one of our late-night conversations where you mentioned loving poutine. I thought, why not take you to the best place to have it?"
Sarah, still processing the surreal turn of events, stammered, "But a helicopter? Astor, this is beyond anything I imagined." Astor opened the door, guiding her inside the helicopter.
"I wanted tonight to be special. Buckle up and let's take off."
As the helicopter soared into the night sky, Sarah couldn't help but be captivated by the breathtaking view below. The city lights sparkled like a blanket of stars, and she stole glances at Astor, who seemed to be enjoying the awe in her eyes. "So, where is this magical place with the best poutine?" Sarah asked, breaking the spell of silence.
"Well, you mentioned poutine, and I thought, why not take you to the place where it all began?"
Sarah's eyes widened in realization. "You're taking me to Canada?" Astor nodded.
"To the place where they have the best poutine. It's a staple, and I thought it would be the perfect way to surprise you. It's a little spot, I know. I wanted our first official date to be memorable."
As the helicopter descended, Sarah saw the sprawling landscape of Canada. Astor led her to a quaint little place known for its authentic poutine. She was both surprised and touched by the effort he had put into planning the special night. The night was crisp, and the aroma of the signature Canadian dish filled the air. As they stepped into the cosy establishment, the warmth of the atmosphere embraced them. The dim lights created an intimate setting, and Astor led Sarah to a private corner. The restaurant exuded charm with exposed brick walls and rustic decor. A waiter approached with a smile.
"Good evening. Are you ready to order?"
Astor, with a glint of excitement in his eyes, turned to Sarah.
"How about we start with the classic poutine and maybe try their special one too?"
Sarah chuckled. "Sure, Astor, I trust your taste in poutine." As they waited for their order, Astor couldn't help but admire the genuine joy on Sarah's face. The surprise of being in Canada for a poutine date seemed to have exceeded her expectations. "Who would have thought we'd end up in Canada for dinner?" Sarah remarked, her eyes sparkling with delight. Astor grinned.
"Well, why wouldn't we after you mentioned your favourite dish as poutine?"
Their conversation flowed effortlessly, a mix of laughter and genuine connection. The barriers that once stood between them seemed to fade away with each shared laughter. As the night progressed, the conversation took a more intimate turn. Astor, looking into Sarah's eyes, confessed,
You know, I've never done anything like this before, flying to another country for a meal.
Sarah, touched by his vulnerability, smiled. Well, it's a first for me too, but it's been amazing, Astor. Over dinner they enjoyed the delicious dish, sharing laughter and stories. Astor revealed a side of himself that was genuine and charming, far from the public image of a millionaire. Sarah found herself drawn to him in a way she had not expected. As they finished their meal, Astor looked at Sarah with a twinkle in his eyes.
Was this too much?
He asked, genuinely concerned. Sarah smiled. It was unexpected, but it was perfect. Thank you for making tonight so special. Astor reached for her hand.
I wanted it to be a night to remember, Sarah.
As the night drew to a close, Astor guided Sarah back to the helicopter. They soared through the night sky once again, the city lights creating a mesmerizing panorama.
I hope tonight lived up to your expectations, Astor said, his eyes locked onto Sarah's.
It exceeded them, Sarah admitted, a soft smile playing on her lips. As they landed back at the mansion, Astor escorted Sarah out of the helicopter. They stood on the helipad, the night sky above them. Sarah turned to Astor. Thank you for everything, Astor. Tonight was truly amazing.
Astor smiled. The pleasure was mine, Sarah. I enjoyed every moment with you.
As they walked towards the sleek black car, Astor stopped for a moment and looked into Sarah's eyes.
I know this might be a lot to take in, but I genuinely like you, Sarah. I want to get to know you better.
Sarah, touched by his sincerity, smiled. I am willing to see where this goes, Astor. Astor dropped her off near her apartment and walked her to the door, the white tulip still in her hand. Sarah turned to him, a question in her eyes. Astor, tonight was incredible. But I have to know. Why me? Why all of this? Astor took a moment, his eyes filled with sincerity.
Sarah, from the moment we crossed paths at the airport, you intrigued me. Your simplicity and authenticity are a breath of fresh air in my world. I wanted to show you a different side of life, but more importantly, I wanted to get to know the woman behind the security uniform.
Sarah, touched by his words, leaned in and placed a gentle kiss on his cheek. Thank you, Astor, for a night I'll never forget. As she entered her apartment, Astor stood outside, the cool night breeze tussling his hair. He sent a final text.
Tonight was magical. Looking forward to more adventures with you, Sarah.
Inside her apartment, Sarah read the message, a smile playing on her lips. The night had indeed been magical, and as she held the bouquet of white tulips, she wondered what other surprises Astor had in store for their unfolding story. The scent of the white tulips still lingered in the air, and she couldn't help but feel a sense of euphoria. Changing into her cozy pajamas and completing her nightly routine, Sarah relished in the joy of the perfect night she had just experienced. As usual, she lay on her back, staring up at the familiar white ceiling. The warmth of the tulips in her hands brought back memories of the fancy date with Astor, the helicopter ride, the exquisite poutine in Canada, and the genuine connection she felt with him were etched in her mind like a vivid painting. Amidst the happiness, however, a wave of discomfort swept over Sarah. The differences between their lives began to weigh on her mind. She thought about the simplicity of her background compared to Astor's world of extravagance. The confusion and nervousness started to overshadow the joy she had just felt moments ago. Lying in bed, Sarah couldn't escape the nagging thoughts. Is this real? Can someone like me fit into Astor's world? The questions circled in her mind, creating a subtle unease. She picked up her phone, scrolled through her contacts, and hesitated for a moment before dialing Jackson's number. As the phone rang, Sarah felt a mix of anxiety and anticipation.
Hey, Sarah! How was your date? Jackson's cheerful voice echoed through the phone.
Sarah took a deep breath and started pouring out her feelings. Jackson, it was incredible. Astor went all out to make it special, and I think I'm falling for him. But Jackson, our lives are so different. I'm from a simple background, and he's living this extravagant life. I'm not sure I can fit into that world." Jackson listened attentively, understanding the turmoil in her voice.
"Sarah, love doesn't see backgrounds or differences. If you felt a connection, then there's something real there. Don't let the fear of the unknown hold you back. Follow your heart."
Encouraged by Jackson's words, Sarah nodded, even though he couldn't see it through the phone. "You're right, Jackson. I should focus on what we have, not what we don't, but it's just overwhelming." Jackson offered a comforting reassurance.
"Change is always overwhelming, especially when it comes to matters of the heart. Take one step at a time. Remember, you're not alone in this."
Feeling a sense of relief after talking to Jackson, Sarah put her phone down. She glanced at the bouquet of white tulips, contemplating the path that lay ahead. Despite the uncertainty, she couldn't deny the growing fondness she had for Astor. As she drifted off to sleep, Sarah's dreams were filled with the enchanting moments of the night, the helicopter ride, the laughter at the restaurant, and the way Astor looked into her eyes. However, amidst the dreams a subtle fear lingered. The next morning, Sarah woke up with a determination to face her feelings head-on. She recalled the text from Astor and decided to reply. "Last night was incredible. Looking forward to more adventures with you, Astor." The smile returned to her face as she hit send. As the day unfolded, Sarah found herself caught between the simplicity she cherished and the allure of the extraordinary life Astor offered. She can't deny the magnetic pull toward him, and yet the doubts lingered. That evening, as she stared at the white ceiling again, Sarah could not escape the questions in her mind. Can I truly be a part of his world? Will I lose myself in the grandeur? The confusion echoed in her thoughts. Unable to contain her thoughts, Sarah decided to confide in Astor. She sent him a message. "Astor, I had an amazing time, but I need to be honest. Your world is dazzling, and I'm just a girl from a simple background. Can we make this work?" The reply from Astor came swiftly.
"Sarah, don't worry about where you came from. What matters is who you are. Let's start this journey together."
The sincerity in his words sparked a glimmer of hope in Sarah's heart. Perhaps, amidst the differences, there was a chance for something beautiful to blossom. Meanwhile, Astor couldn't shake off the radiant joy that lingered from the magical night with Sarah. As he read her morning message, a wide smile graced his face. "Looking forward to more adventures with you, Astor." The words resonated, confirming that the enchantment of the previous night was not one-sided. The day unfolded with a constant buzz in Astor's mind. Thoughts of Sarah, the laughter they shared, and the genuine connection they forged consumed him. He found himself lost in the sweet memories, eagerly anticipating the next chapter of their unexpected journey. As evening descended, Astor's excitement swelled. The message from Sarah had planted a seed of hope, and he longed to see her again. However, a tinge of concern crept in when he received her evening text. The mention of his extravagant world seemed to cast a shadow on the euphoria. Astor, determined to reassure Sarah, grabbed his car keys and drove towards her apartment. The night air carried a mix of anticipation and nervousness as he approached her doorstep. He took a deep breath, rang the bell, and waited with a bouquet of white tulips in hand. When Sarah opened the door, a mix of surprise and delight painted her face. Astor couldn't help but notice the subtle uncertainty in her eyes. Stepping inside, he began.
"Sarah, I couldn't stop thinking about you all day. Your message was wonderful, but I sensed a bit of hesitation. I wanted to assure you from the bottom of my heart that I cherish who you are." He continued, "I know my world might seem extravagant, but that doesn't define us. You're becoming an important part of my life, and I want to spend a lot of time with you, holding your hand, sharing laughter, and creating memories together."
As he spoke, Astor could see the emotions playing on Sarah's face. He reached for her hands, gently holding them in his.
"I understand that our lives are different, but that doesn't mean we can't find a beautiful balance. I want you to be comfortable, Sarah. I want this to be about us, not about where we come from."
Sarah's eyes softened and a small smile appeared on her lips. Astor, with a tender reassurance, added,
Let's take this one step at a time. I'm not here to change you or make you fit into a mould. I appreciate you for who you are. I want you to feel the same way.
Astor sensed a shift in the atmosphere, a subtle easing of the tension. He decided to lighten up the mood.
And hey, I bought your favourite, white tulips.
He handed her the bouquet, and the fragrance filled the room. With a playful grin, Astor continued,
I believe in us, Sarah. I believe in the unexpected magic we've found. Let's not overthink it. Let's enjoy the journey, one day at a time.
As he spoke, Astor leaned in and gently kissed Sarah's cheeks. The gesture was filled with warmth and sincerity, a promise of understanding and support. He whispered,
I'm here for you, Sarah. Let's make this journey something extraordinary together.
They spent the evening talking, sharing dreams, and even laughing about the uncertainties that life often brings. Astor's words and actions were a testament of his genuine intentions. He wanted Sarah to know that, despite the differences, she was valued for who she was. As the night unfolded, Astor left Sarah's apartment with a sense of fulfillment. The doubts that lingered in her mind seemed to have faded, replaced by a newfound understanding. He texted her again,
Thank you for letting me be a part of your evening. Looking forward to many more.
Astor reflected on the evening as he drove back, sensing a deepening connection with Sarah. Her simplicity and authenticity, qualities he admired, made her unique. Navigating their different worlds wouldn't be easy, but he was willing to make the effort. The night air promised an unfolding love story, and Astor looked forward to the adventures with hope. Grateful for the journey that began with a simple poutine date in Canada, he drove through the city lights. As Astor left, relief washed over Sarah, her heart warmed by the evening. Holding the bouquet of white tulips, a tranquil smile adorned her face. With each step Astor took away, doubts in her mind seemed to dissipate. Sinking into her favourite chair, she replayed Astor's reassurances, finding comfort in his determination to understand and cherish her. Texting Astor, she expressed gratitude. Tonight was everything I needed. Thank you for being so understanding, Astor. The message conveyed newfound clarity and excitement. Astor smiled, feeling accomplished in easing her concerns. Determined to make the next date special and comfortable for her, he proposed a cosy candlelit dinner. Sarah's response was quick and enthusiastic. Sounds perfect, Astor. I'm looking forward to it. The anticipation built for the second date. On the day, Astor dressed in a sleek suit, picked up a bouquet of white tulips, recalling the joy they brought Sarah the first time. He drove to her apartment, excited to create another magical evening. Nervous but hopeful, he rang the doorbell, holding the bouquet. When Sarah opened the door, her eyes lit up at the sight of the white tulips. Astor grinned.
I couldn't resist bringing these again. They seem to bring joy to your eyes.
Sarah chuckled. They do. Thank you, Astor. They're beautiful. Astor gestured toward the car.
Shall we?
Once again he opened the car door for her, and they set off for the Italian restaurant he had carefully chosen. Throughout the drive their conversation flowed effortlessly, the laughter and connection between them growing stronger with each passing moment. As they arrived at the restaurant, the warm glow of the candlelight spilled out onto the sidewalk. Astor opened the door for Sarah, and they entered the cosy ambiance of the place. Soft jazz music played in the background, creating a romantic atmosphere. Astor guided Sarah to a table adorned with flickering candles. Pulling the chair for her, he said,
I hope you feel comfortable here, Sarah.
She smiled. It's perfect, Astor. Thank you for putting so much thought into this. They perused the menu, and Sarah decided on a mushroom and chicken risotto, while Astor opted for a lobster risotto. The waiter took their orders, leaving them in the intimate cocoon of the restaurant. As they waited for their food, Astor couldn't help but gaze at Sarah, appreciating the simplicity and beauty that radiated from her. He reached for her hand across the table.
I'm so glad you're here with me, Sarah.
She met his gaze. Me too, Astor. This is lovely. Their dinner arrived, and they savoured each bite, exchanging smiles and stealing glances. The flavours melded perfectly with the romantic ambience, creating a moment that felt like it was suspended in time. Astor, with a twinkle in his eye, broke the silence.
You know, I've been thinking about our first date a lot. The helicopter ride and the poutine in Canada were extraordinary, but tonight I wanted something simpler, something that reflects the genuine connection we share.
Sarah nodded, appreciating the sentiment behind his words. I love it, Astor. This is exactly what I needed. As they finished their meal, Astor raised his glass.
2 unexpected adventures and genuine connections.
They clinked glasses, sealing the moment with a shared toast. The night continued with heartfelt conversations, laughter, and the soft glow of candlelight casting a warm embrace around them. As dessert arrived, Astor felt a sense of contentment. Sarah seemed at ease, and he hoped that this evening had erased any lingering doubts she might have had. They shared a decadent chocolate dessert, each bite sweet punctuation to their growing connection. Amidst the laughter and shared stories, Astor leaned in, his eyes locked onto Sarah's.
I have something for you.
He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. Opening it, he revealed a delicate necklace with a charm in the shape of a white tulip. Sarah's eyes widened in surprise. Astor, it's beautiful. He gently placed the necklace around her neck.
A symbol of our journey and a reminder of the joy you bring to my life.
Touched by the gesture, Sarah whispered, Thank you, Astor. I'll cherish it. As they enjoyed their dessert, Sarah felt a sudden craving for warm water. She politely called the waiter over and asked, Could you please bring me a glass of warm water? The waiter nodded with a smile.
Certainly, ma'am. I'll bring it right away.
Excitement filled the air as Astor and Sarah continued their conversation. The restaurant buzzed with activity, and the scent of Italian cuisine lingered around them. The waiter returned with a tray holding a steaming glass of warm water. The waiter slipped and accidentally poured the hot water over Sarah. A gasp filled the air as she quickly stood up, startled by the sudden warmth on her clothes. The waiter panicked and stammered,
I am so sorry, I didn't mean to.
Sarah, feeling the heat but maintaining her composure, reassured him, Oh, it's okay. Accidents happen. Just be more careful, please. The waiter, visibly flustered, apologized again and hurriedly went back to attend to his other duties. Sarah dabbed at the wet spots on her dress, trying to salvage the evening. Unbeknownst to her, Astor's expression had shifted from delight to intense. intense anger. In a sudden eruption of fury, Astor shot up from his seat, his eyes burning with rage. Without a word, he grabbed the waiter by his collar, his fists clenched. Sarah, bewildered and taken aback, couldn't comprehend the sudden transformation in Astor's demeanour. Astor's voice, filled with fury, cut through the restaurant noise. "How dare you! Do you have any idea who she is? How could you be so careless?" The waiter, terrified and trembling, tried to apologise. "I'm sorry, sir. It was an accident, I swear." But Astor, fueled by a surge of anger, began to punch the waiter relentlessly. The once serene atmosphere of the restaurant was shattered as chaos ensued. Other diners, shocked by the sudden violence, tried to intervene, urging Astor to stop. Sarah, witnessing the brutality, felt a mix of disbelief and horror. She never expected Astor, who had shown a softer side over the past few months, to resort to violence over a simple accident. As the waiter began to bleed, Sarah, gathering her strength, stood up and shouted, "Stop! What are you doing, Astor?" Her words seemed to penetrate the rage within Astor, and he finally released the waiter. The waiter, visibly injured and frightened, quickly retreated. Astor, breathing heavily, looked around at the shocked faces of the other diners. Sarah, with tears in her eyes, couldn't bear to stay in that moment any longer. She left the restaurant without a word, leaving behind a trail of whispers and astonished stares. Astor, realizing the gravity of his actions, felt a profound sense of guilt and remorse. As Sarah stepped outside, she hailed an Uber, her mind spinning with confusion and betrayal. The car arrived and she cried to her apartment, trying to make sense of the abrupt transformation in Astor's behaviour. Meanwhile, Astor is left standing in the chaotic aftermath, feeling a deep sense of regret wash over him. The realization of what he had done hit him like a ton of bricks. He rushed out of the restaurant, but Sarah was already gone. Determined to make amends, Astor hopped into his car and sped towards Sarah's apartment. The city lights blurred as guilt and frustration consumed him. He couldn't believe he had let his anger take control, especially in front of someone he cared about. Arriving at Sarah's apartment, Astor anxiously knocked on her door. When she opened it, he could see the tear stains on her face. He began. "Sarah, I don't know what came over me. I'm so sorry. I never meant for things to escalate like that." Sarah, her eyes reflecting a mix of hurt and disappointment, whispered, "Astor, I thought you had changed. I can't believe you would resort to violence over something so trivial. I need some time alone." Astor, feeling the weight of his actions, nodded solemnly. "I understand. But please know that I am truly sorry. I'll do whatever it takes to make things right." Sarah closed the door, leaving Astor standing in the hallway, grappling with the consequences of his impulsive actions. As he walked back to his car, he couldn't shake the feeling of betrayal that lingered in the night air. The following days were filled with a heavy silence between Astor and Sarah. He sent apology messages, expressing his regret and promising to seek anger management help. However, Sarah needed time to process the events that unfolded that night. Eventually, Sarah agreed to meet Astor in a neutral setting, a quiet park where she comes whenever she wants to clear her mind. The air was thick with tension as they faced each other, both carrying the weight of the past. Astor, his eyes filled with remorse, started. "Sarah, I can't apologize enough for what happened. It was inexcusable, and I hate myself for losing control like that." Sarah, her gaze steady, replied, "Astor, I never expected that side of you. I thought you had changed. Violence is never the answer, no matter the circumstances." Astor nodded. "You're right. I should have handled it differently. I'm committed to changing my behaviour, not just for you, but for myself. I've started seeking help to address my anger issues." Sarah appreciated the sincerity in his words, but remained cautious. "Changing isn't easy, Astor. I need to see consistent actions, not just words. Trust needs to be rebuilt." Astor agreed. "I understand, Sarah. I'll do whatever it takes to earn back your trust. I never want to see you hurt because of my actions again." Their conversation continued, with Astor opening up about his struggles and the steps he was taking to become a better person. Sarah, though guarded, saw a glimmer of genuine remorse in his eyes. As the sun began to set, casting a warm glow over the park, Sarah admitted, "Astor, I need time to process everything. I can't promise things will go back to the way they were, but I'm willing to see if you truly change."
Astor nodded. "I'll respect your decision, Sarah. Just know that I'm committed to making amends."
Months passed, and the once tumultuous chapter between Astor and Sarah lingered in the backdrop of their lives. Astor, true to his promise, had sought therapy, attended anger management classes, and worked on his personal growth. Meanwhile, Sarah, while initially hesitant, found herself missing the connection they had shared before the incident. Astor occasionally sent messages to Sarah, expressing remorse and sincere apologies. These texts were met with mixed emotions from Sarah, torn between the pain of the past and a yearning for the connection they once had. The hole in her life left by Astor's absence became more palpable each day, and a part of her contemplated the possibility of giving him a second chance. One day, Astor, feeling a surge of courage, decided to be more direct. He texted Sarah,
"I know I messed up, and I can't change the past, but I miss you, Sarah. Can we meet and talk? I want to show you the changes I've made."
Sarah, after much contemplation, agreed to meet. She felt a mix of nerves and anticipation as she got ready for the meeting. Astor, anxious yet hopeful, waited for her at his headquarters, eager to demonstrate the transformation he had undergone. Sarah's heart raced as she stepped out of the Uber and approached the headquarters. The air was thick with tension, mirroring the emotions churning within her. As she crossed the bustling street, she spotted Astor on the other side. Their eyes met, and she quickened her pace, eager yet apprehensive about the impending conversation. On the opposite side of the road, Astor felt a mix of nervousness and hope. He couldn't shake the weight of the past, but he was determined to prove that he had changed. As Sarah approached, he took a deep breath and began to walk towards her. The distance between them closed, but just as Sarah reached Astor, her attention solely on him, she didn't notice the sides of the road. Astor, seeing a looming danger, instinctively reacted, rushing towards her.
"Sarah, watch out!"
he yelled, his voice cutting through the city sounds. Without hesitation, Astor pushed her out of harm's way, sacrificing himself as a massive truck sped dangerously close. Time seemed to freeze for Sarah as she stumbled backward, her heart pounding in her chest. The screeching of tires, the blaring horn, and the sudden impact of the collision filled the air. She watched in horror as Astor took the brunt of the hit, his body thrown to the ground. "Miss Campbell!" Astor's secretary, who'd been waiting nearby, rushed towards them, her eyes widening in shock. Sarah, her hands trembling, stumbled towards Astor's unconscious form. "Astor, no! What have I done?" she cried, her voice laced with guilt and despair. Blood-stained Astor's clothes and the severity of the situation unfolded before her eyes. Astor's secretary quickly dialed for an ambulance, panic evident in her voice. "We need help! Mr. Astor is hurt! We need an ambulance right away!" As the ambulance raced towards them, Sarah cradled Astor's head in her lap, tears streaming down her face. "Astor, please, please wake up. I didn't want this. I didn't want any of this," she whispered, her voice breaking. Astor remained unconscious, his face pale against the backdrop of the bustling city. The ambulance screeched to a halt and paramedics rushed out with a stretcher. They carefully attended to Astor, assessing his injuries as Sarah stood by, her eyes filled with a mixture of fear and regret. In the ambulance, Sarah held Astor's hand, her grip tight. The paramedics worked swiftly, doing their best to stabilize him. As the vehicle sped toward the hospital, Sarah couldn't help but replay the events in her mind. The echoes of their tumultuous past mingled with the siren's wail, creating a dissonant symphony of emotions. As they arrived at the hospital, Sarah was ushered to the waiting area. The minutes felt like hours, and she clung to the hope that Astor would be okay. The weight of their complicated history lingered, but at that moment all she wished for was his recovery. The doctor emerged wearing a solemn expression.
"He's in critical condition. We're doing everything we can, but it's touch and go. We'll keep you updated. the doctor said, leaving Sarah in a state of anguished uncertainty. The hospital's corridor became a desolate period as Sarah grappled with the consequences of the day's events. The future hung in the balance, and the road ahead seemed uncertain and fraught with regret. Inside the emergency room, doctors worked diligently to stabilize Astor. The atmosphere was tense, with medical professionals moving swiftly and efficiently around him. Monitors beeped, and the room echoed with the urgency of the situation. The medical team, recognizing the severity of Astor's injuries, spared no effort to save him. As the minutes ticked by, Sarah paced anxiously in the waiting area, her mind filled with a tumultuous blend of fear and hope. The weight of guilt still hung over her, but a glimmer of relief emerged as the news arrived. The doctors had managed to stabilize Astor. A doctor emerged, wearing a wary but reassuring smile.
"He's stable now, but it was touch and go for a moment. We'll need to keep him under observation for a while. You can see him briefly, but he needs rest," the doctor explained.
Sarah's heart leaped with a mix of joy and gratitude. The tears that had flowed out of fear now transformed into tears of relief. She followed the doctor into the room where Astor lay, still unconscious but no longer in imminent danger. A soft sigh escaped Sarah as she looked at Astor, hooked up to various monitors and surrounded by medical equipment. The sight of him, though battered and bruised, brought a profound sense of relief. She reached out and gently held his hand, her fingers tracing over the bandages. "I'm so sorry, Astor," she whispered, her voice a mix of regret and gratitude. "Thank you for saving me, even if it meant risking yourself." Astor slowly regained consciousness.
"Hey,"
he whispered, his voice barely audible. Tears streamed down Sarah's face as she clasped his hand. "You scared me, Astor. Please don't ever do this again." Astor, his gaze filled with sincerity, replied,
"I didn't mean to, Sarah. I'm sorry."
Astor, feeling a bit more alert, looked at Sarah.
"I must have worried you a lot, didn't I?"
he said, a hint of remorse in his eyes. Sarah, unable to hold back her emotions, nodded. "You have no idea, Astor. When I saw you lying down on the road and then the blood..." She trailed off, her voice breaking. Astor reached out to wipe away a tear from her cheek.
"I'm so sorry, Sarah. I never meant for things to turn out like this."
Sarah shook her head. "No, Astor, it's not your fault. You've been through so much and you still managed to protect me." Astor's gaze held a mixture of gratitude and affection.
"I would do it all over again, if it meant keeping you safe," he confessed.
The heaviness of the moment overwhelmed Astor, and, succumbing to the drowsiness induced by the surgery, he fell asleep.
Sarah, sitting by his bedside, couldn't shake the feeling that she was somehow responsible for the turn of events. As Astor slept, Sarah made a difficult decision. She believed her presence in Astor's life had caused enough trouble and pain. She decided to distance herself, convinced that leaving him was the best way to protect him. Leaning down, she placed a gentle kiss on his forehead and whispered, "I love you, Astor. I will always love you. Thank you for all the amazing unexpected adventures." The white tulip pendant brushed against his palm as she left the room, tears streaming down her face. The weight of her decision hung heavy in the sterile hospital air. Sarah knew that, despite the pain, she had to let go for Astor's sake. As she walked away, she left a piece of her heart in that hospital room, aching with the bittersweet realization that love sometimes requires sacrifice. Astor woke up to a world of pain, both physical and emotional. Slowly opening his eyes after what felt like an eternity, he discovered something nestled in his palm. Through the haze of his blurry vision, he recognized the familiar shape of the white tulip pendant he had given Sarah. The realization hit him like a tidal wave, and a tear escaped from his eyes. He lay there for a moment, staring at the pendant, grappling with the weight of what had transpired. The absence of Sarah's presence, the pendant left behind, it all painted a stark picture. Astor was devastated, and the reality of losing her hung heavy in the air. As Astor went through a rigorous 3-month recovery, his thoughts were consumed by Sarah. The hospital room, despite its sterile surroundings, felt empty without her infectious spirit. Astor, accustomed to a life of extravagance, was now confined to a hospital bed, yearning for the simplicity and warmth that Sarah had brought into his life. Meanwhile, Sarah, with the heart still mending, returned to her work. She tried to piece together the fragments of her shattered emotions, finding solace in her daily routine. Yet every prayer she uttered was dedicated to Astor's well-being. One day, after weeks of internal struggle, Astor couldn't bear the pain of separation any longer. Determined to set things right, he decided to go to Sarah. With a resolve that surpassed his physical limitations, he got out of bed, ignoring the protests of his weary body. Clad not in a luxury suit, but in his hospital gown, he drove to her apartment. Upon reaching the familiar building, Astor realized that Sarah might not be there. His instincts led him to the airport, the place where their unexpected journey had begun. Ignoring the odd stares from onlookers, Astor, driven by desperation, ran through the bustling corridors of the John F. Kennedy Airport. Searching for any sign of her, Astor's heart raced. The echoes of Sarah's name seemed to reverberate through the air. Suddenly, a voice from behind called out, "Astor?" He turned around, hope and disbelief in his eyes, to see Sarah standing there as if the universe had conspired to bring them back together. Her eyes mirrored the pain and longing he had felt during those agonizing months. "Astor," she repeated, her voice a mix of surprise and emotion. The tension between them was palpable as they stood in the bustling airport, surrounded by the ebb and flow of travellers. Astor, struggling to find words, finally managed,
"Sarah,
She interrupted him. "You shouldn't be here, Astor. I left for a reason, and what in the world are you wearing?" He chuckled and nodded, acknowledging the gravity of his actions.
"I know. I am sorry, Sarah. I couldn't bear the thought of losing you. Can we talk?"
With a hesitant nod, Sarah agreed. "Let's find a quiet place." As Astor and Sarah found a quiet corner in the airport, the emotional tension between them was palpable. Astor, still recovering from the physical and emotional toll of the past 3 months, couldn't shake the heartbreak that gripped him. It felt as though a colossal void had taken residence in his chest, a void that only Sarah's presence could fill. He took a deep breath, attempting to gather the courage to express the torrent of emotions within him.
"Sarah," he began, his voice laden with vulnerability, "I've missed you every single day. Felt like a part of me was missing, like a void that I couldn't shut. The thought of not having you in my life was unbearable."
Sarah, her eyes filled with a mixture of sorrow and longing, listened intently. The pain etched on Astor's face mirrored the ache in her own heart.
"When you left, that day from the hospital. I understood why you did it. You didn't want to cause me harm, but I couldn't stop thinking about you for even a second in these 3 months. I realize how much I need you, Sarah.
Astor confessed, his words carrying the weight of his realization.
I guess I'm the one who says this first.
Astor chuckled through teary eyes, the vulnerability in his voice laid bare. He took a deep breath, summoning the courage to express what had been tormenting him for months.
I love you, Sarah Campbell. I cannot live without you in this life.
Sarah, her eyes glistening with unshed tears, met his gaze. The weight of the moment hung between them, and for a brief second, time seemed to stand still. You think so? Astor Richfield? She replied, her voice a delicate mix of doubt and hope. Before Astor could respond, he heard a voice, a memory that had played in his subconscious during those long, agonizing nights in the hospital. I love you, Astor. I will always love you, echoed Sarah's voice from the past. Astor's eyes widened in realization, and a genuine smile broke the heaviness that had plagued him. I remember, he whispered, his voice filled with emotion. He gently hugged her, and their embrace tightened. He pressed a tender kiss on her forehead. I remember, he repeated, as if trying to etch the memory into his soul. Sarah, overwhelmed with a mix of emotions, couldn't resist the pull of Astor's warmth and love. She hugged him back, tears streaming down her cheeks. At that moment, the world outside that embrace faded away, leaving only the two of them and the unspoken promise of a shared future. As they pulled away, Astor held Sarah at arm's length, his hands on her hips, their eyes locked, conveying more than words ever could. I hope you remember that for all your life, Astor Richfield, Sarah said, her hand gently curled around his neck. Astor nodded, a silent acknowledgement of the profound impact Sarah had on him. I won't forget, I can't forget, he replied, his voice filled with sincerity. Her heart swelling with emotions reciprocated. I love you, Astor, and I don't want to imagine my life without you. Astor, holding Sarah's hand, turned to her with a determined gaze. This isn't the end, Sarah. We've been through a lot, and I want to face the future with you by my side. Sarah, a mix of emotions in her eyes, smiled. I'm with you, Astor, through thick and thin. With that, they stood there hand in hand, ready to face the challenges and uncertainties that lay ahead. The unexpected journey that had taken them through exhilarating highs and devastating lows had brought them back to each other, and they were determined to make the most of the second chance fate had granted them.